and welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to be talking about the Midwest. You might be wondering, Emily, why? Why in a million years would you be talking about the Midwest? And, well, for one, I've lived in the Midwest my entire life, and two, nobody else is. Like, nobody. So we're going to be talking about it. Specifically, we're going to be talking about 4 different Midwestern tropes that I've seen appear in fiction and popular media kind of in general, and kind of how they originated and why they all kind of suck. So let's get into it, shall we? Number 1, America's Heartland. So this is an older trope that's not so much used in the mainstream anymore, but it still comes out quite a bit, so I'm still going to be talking about it. This trope basically asserts that the Midwest is the heart and soul of America. This trope usually manifests itself, ironically enough, in stories that don't actually take place in the Midwest itself. Rather, this trope usually appears in stories where a character, or the protagonist usually, is from the Midwest and they are taking out of their element, usually to a big city like New York or Los Angeles, or sometimes some sort of like foreign or distant land. Think of like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz or Nick from The Great Gatsby. So why does this trope exist? The Midwest is associated with the working class, mostly white working class, which is represented to the mainstream audience as coming from humble beginnings, even if that's not entirely accurate to the actual character being portrayed. Again, think of someone like Nick from The Great Gatsby, who doesn't actually come from really the most humble beginnings. However, the Midwest is still associated in general with the common man, which is usually either represented as a farmer or a factory worker, both of which were and are associated with the Midwest, and at one point in America's history was the dominant profession of most Americans. There are several problems with this trope. Really, the main problem of this is that this trope basically asserts that the Midwest is boring and or simple. And that can't be further from the truth. Also the idea that the common man is white, or even that really the common Midwesterner is white, is kind of problematic and kind of erases all the Midwesterners of color, in which I can guarantee you there are many. But this idea could also be remedied with maybe making that main character who goes into a big city a person of color. I think it would actually be a pretty interesting twist a little bit on that trope, and you could do a lot more with it. Number 2, the small Midwestern town. So imagine you're in a friendly town with a bunch of small businesses and small family farms where, sure, the residents are a little nosy, but that's just because they care. Oh, and did I mention there's definitely a black family in this town, and they're not like oppressed or anything, and they're just as much as part of the community as everyone else, and don't question too much why there's only one minority family in this entire town. And so you've probably seen this trope in like a quarter of all Hallmark movies, and also a surprisingly large amount of horror settings. This trope, like the previous trope, is used as shorthand for America's innocence and or ignorance. And it also kind of ties into the idea of the small, charming small town. However, what sets the Midwestern small town usually apart from other small towns is the idea of isolation. The Midwest being the only region not having a coastline, and no, the Great Lakes don't count, is seen as kind of cut off from the rest of the world, stuck in its own little bubble. In romance or lighthearted stories, this is an harmless thing, while in horror, this isolation and ignorance leaves them vulnerable to outside, or if the story's really spicy, inside threats. There are a lot of problems associated with this trope, so much to the point where I'm thinking of making an entire video just discussing more about this trope and all the problems associated with it. And Actually, if this video gets like 2 whole likes, I'll make an entire video on that. But if I were to sum it all up, the biggest problem with this trope is that it gives outsiders the wrong idea of what these small Midwestern towns are actually like.
Number 3, the death of the American dream.
I don't know why, but I feel like every modern story about the death of the American dream takes place in the Midwest. Well, actually, I think I do know the reason why this has happened. The Midwest, especially in recent decades, has gone through a major decline. And this decline is physically obvious with our crippling infrastructure, our poorly paved roads, and our outdated systems. Not that other areas of the country haven't seen a similar decline, but again, the Midwest, as a general rule of thumb, has arguably fallen the hardest. As I mentioned earlier, one of the stereotypes associated with the Midwest is the idea of the American heartland. The Midwest used to symbolize everything good and right with America, and now it tends to symbolize everything wrong with America. A fallen titan, per se. This trope will usually star a cast of white working class people who were never able to make it because of either A, laziness and incompetence, or B, just bad luck. The former tends to be more common than the latter. I'm not gonna lie, I actually like this trope in some of its incarnations, and if this video gets 3 whole likes, I'll make an entire video about this trope. But despite my admiration for this trope, it's still quite problematic in the sense that these general struggles are usually portrayed like it's somehow the working class individual's fault they couldn't make it. It's their fault, and it's their fault they didn't save enough money, or they weren't smart enough to escape, rather than actually addressing these systemic issues that led to this in the first place. Also, it's sometimes used in fascist propaganda. Again, I'll make an entire video if I just get like 3 likes on this video.
Number 4, the corrupt big city.
So, let me set the scene for you. It's a dark, grim, unkempt, unclean city run by corrupt politicians being paid off by mob bosses and union leaders. Wait, is that right? Yep, union leaders. That seems kind of weird, right? Well, it actually makes sense in historical context. During the 19th century, cities in the Midwest, notably Chicago and Detroit, were rapidly industrializing and eventually became the central hub for manufacturing. For Detroit, this was the auto industry, and for Chicago, well, Chicago became the main transportation hub, financial hub for the Midwest. They were also the majority city for the meatpacking industry and the lumber industry. Now, how particularly Chicago became the central hub for not only the region, but for like the entire country, so fascinating in its own right. And if this video gets 10 likes, I'll make a whole video about this. Needless to say, this industrialization created a lot of unskilled jobs, which attracted a lot of new people, notably ex-slaves or children of ex-slaves from the South, and immigrants, particularly from Eastern and Southern Europe. However, these jobs that these people were filling were terrible. Absolutely terrible. Not only were they unclean, dangerous, and mentally debilitating, but they also paid criminally low, and I do mean criminally low to today's standards, or even the 1930s standards. And also, the workers were forced to work radically long hours. I'm talking 12 to 13-hour shifts with little to no breaks, and they would be doing this 6 or 7 days a week. And politicians did little to nothing about it because laissez-faire capitalism, and also usually big businesses were paying them off. And that's actually where this trope originated from. It was socialist or progressive propaganda to expose the corruption and poor working conditions going on in these large cities. An example of this is The Jungle, which is a fictional story that highlights the real, terrible conditions of the meatpacking industry and its effects on the workers and the environment. This actually worked to a point because soon a lot of these Midwestern cities and other cities around the entire country started creating unions and union bosses. The problem with these union bosses were that they didn't always fight in the interest of the workers they were supposedly representing. Because of course they weren't. And also, they were getting a lot of money from union fees, which allowed them to get rich and pay off politicians to implement policies to help them maintain their power. So this is where the trope of the corrupt union boss comes from. Originally, this trope was used by socialists, centrists, and conservatives alike, but albeit for different reasons. Socialists would argue, or they would end their story with the workers either taking back the union for themselves or seizing the means of production entirely, while centrists would argue some reform shit, and conservatives, remember how I mentioned earlier that a lot of Black people and immigrants were moving into these cities around the time everything was going to shit for working people as a whole? Yeah. So the conservatives blamed it on them because that's what racists do. And yeah, that characterization of the big corrupt Midwestern city is the one I've seen the most, especially in the modern era. But I've also recently been seeing this trope to use to tell stories about racism from a Black or brown perspective, so that's been interesting, and I hope to see more evolutions of this trope in the future. And again, if you want me to go more into this or these tropes, I'll probably make a video on it. Maybe. I don't know. And that's about it. These are my 4 tropes associated with the Midwest. What were your favorite and least favorite tropes on this list? Or just in general? Personally, my least favorite on this list is the small town trope, and my favorite is the American Dream trope. Leave a comment down below telling me what you think, or if there's anything more you want to learn about regarding these tropes, or if you have any other tropes you'd like to talk about it. I'm back for just a second to basically give a book recommendation. I did this my last video and I kind of enjoyed it, so I'm going to do it this time. I am recommending Freshwater by, I will have name on bottom. Again, I can't pronounce names, but you know, this is actually a really good book. So this is a really good book. It's basically about this one girl named Ada, and so she has like a bunch of like different like spirits or gods stuck inside her, and they like take over her body, and it's kind of about her like, or her like the spirits like trying to figure out like how to kind of coexist and everything. And so yeah, it's really good. It's different from like your average novel format. It's really interesting. It's split into multiple perspectives and the different spirits as well as Ada, and some of the different spirits in Ada, and yeah, so it's interesting. It's got a weird, not exactly linear timeline. It really feels almost like an account of like what happening. So it's like they're just sitting down and like writing this, and there's a lot of sections specifically where it feels like they're just like writing this out like in a diary or something. And it's interesting. It's not formatted like it's written in a diary, but it's written like it's told as an account. But yeah, it's really good. I will say though, there's like a lot of trigger warnings in this. There have like sexual assault and rape and suicide. So if those things trigger you, I wouldn't necessarily read this book. But unless those things trigger you, I would definitely read this. It's got some really interesting representation. It's told from the main character. Well, the main character is from Nicaragua and moves to America. So you got that kind of representation. There's also a lot of kind of like non-binary and asexual or bi representation, and all of that in this book. So that's pretty interesting. It's subtle. It's really subtle, but it's definitely there. And yeah, it's just a really it's a really great book for like to like analyze or something like that. I don't really know much about some of the stuff like it talks about and it alludes to. Like I can tell that it's alluding to stuff, but I can't exactly pinpoint it. So I don't think I would ever write something on it. But it's definitely like a book like you can like analyze and like write for like a lit paper. It's kind of like one of those books where it's like it's good in that sense. But I think you can still just enjoy it for fun. I read this for fun, obviously, and I enjoyed it. So yeah, so that is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel to get more because I don't post regularly. And ring the bell so you know as soon as I upload. And yeah, leave a comment down below telling me what you think. Or if you've read Freshwater or anything, let me know. And yeah, also you can follow me and my writing partner on Instagram at Just2Writers and on Tumblr under Writing Duo. And also you can check out my website and my blog. A link will be to all that in the description